Iran's supreme leader has warned that a U.S. attack on his country could trigger a regional war. There's been a tense standoff between the two countries after the U.S. president threatened military action over Tehran's deadly crackdown on anti-government protests.
In the past, Americans repeatedly made threats in their statements saying that all options are on the table and all options include the option of war. Now, this man also keeps claiming that they have sent aircraft carriers and so on. In my view, the Iranian nation should not be frightened by such things. The people of Iran are not influenced by this kind of talk. We are not the initiators of war. We do not want to oppress anyone or attack any country. But in response to anyone who seeks to attack, the Iranian nation will deliver a strong blow. Americans should also know that if they start a war this time, it will be a regional war.
While Trump says he's hopeful for a deal with Iran, a U.S. strike force is now positioned in the region. When asked about Ali Khamenei's comments, Trump didn't rule out military force.
We have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Meanwhile, the Secretary General of Iran's powerful National Security Council, Ali Larijani, has made a statement on X saying, contrary to the artificially manufactured media war narrative, the formation of a framework for negotiations is progressing. All right, Trita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Trita, thanks so much for being with us here on Al Jazeera. So we've heard Donald Trump say that he hopes a deal with Iran will be made. And we saw this statement that we just talked about from Ali Larijani, the Secretary General of Iran's National Security Council, saying that the framework for negotiations is progressing. From your vantage point, where does that leave things right now? And what is the most effective way of de-escalating this situation?
There are talks going on in the background, and there is an immense effort by regional states, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, to a certain extent Saudi Arabia and Oman, of course, to try to find a solution to this and avoid war. The view of these countries and most countries in the region, with the exception of Israel and potentially the UAE, is that a war would be devastating for the region as a whole. It would not be a quick victory for the U.S. in any way, shape, or form, but would lead to major regional destabilization. The quickest way to avoid this path, because despite the fact that these talks are going on, and despite that some progress is being made, I'm skeptical about the long-term solution unless something much bigger is done. And I think it is, the ball is in many ways in Tehran's court, because I think the most obvious and effective de-escalatory path is for the Iranians to talk directly to Trump. Not a negotiation per se, but just initiate that conversation. We've seen how that has been very effective for other world leaders to be able to diffuse the situation and broaden the parameters of negotiations.
So, Trita, let me ask you, what does that scenario look like? How does that conversation happen where Iranian leaders have a direct conversation with Donald Trump? Is that a scenario you can see happening in this climate?
I certainly think it can happen. I'm not seeing clear signs that there is readiness in Tehran for this, but I do not rule it out in any way, shape, or form that it can happen. Many things that have happened between the United States and Iran in the last 20 years that turn out to be turning points were things that most people thought could not even happen, yet they did. And this one too can happen. And it could be through the help of some of the regional states, that the conversation actually would be a three-way or a four-way with one or two other world regional leaders on the call as well. And this is, I think, important for Trump, because I am not seeing any other country that has a major conflict with Trump, but that refuses to engage with him directly. I don't see what the Iranians have to lose by trying this card, a card that they so far have refused to play.
So, Trita, let me get back to a point that you were alluding to just a couple of minutes ago when you were speaking about the fact that Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has warned that a U.S. attack on his country could trigger a regional war. Is the strategy on his part to instill a fear in regional leaders that a wider, more devastating war may be on the horizon, and therefore to encourage regional leaders who get along with Trump to therefore negotiate a de-escalation?
That is certainly one element of what they're trying to do. But I think the way you phrase it made it sound as if it's a false threat. I don't think it is a false threat. And I think the primary audience of this is Donald Trump himself. I think the Iranian calculation amongst those who are skeptical about diplomacy is that Trump has an exaggerated view of Iran's current weakness. Clearly, Iran is weaker than it was 2 years ago, but the view in the White House, perhaps informed by efforts by the Israelis, is exaggerated. And as a result, he's driving a maximalist bargain. And he's essentially thinking that through this military mobilization, he will be able to force the Iranians to capitulate. But the thinking on the Iranian side is a small war, not in the sense that it would be symbolic, but one in which the U.S. attacks and the Iranians give an unprecedented response in the region and against U.S. forces, will quickly dispel Trump of any belief he may have had that this could be a quick, glorious victory similar to Venezuela, similar to other military actions that he's taken, and as a result, force Trump to step back and then come back to the negotiating table, but with a much more realistic assessment of what kind of demands he can make and what kind of coercion he can pursue. This is, of course, there's no guarantee that this type of a calculation could work out, and it could, and very likely also end up into a much longer war that would be devastating for all sides. And the Iranians recognize, obviously, they will take huge hits, even in the best case scenario that they have. But I think there is so little faith in negotiations with Trump right now that argument is the one that seems to be prevailing in Tehran right now.
So Trita, pardon me, if I can just take what you're saying one step further. If Trump does ultimately decide to launch a military strike on Iran, be it large scale, be it small scale, you're talking about the calculations that are at hand right now. What kind of retaliatory actions do you think we could see Iran take going forward?
Well, the Iranians do have significant missile capabilities that were proven not only during the 12-day war with Israel, but also in the strikes that they did against Doha, that show that they can penetrate all layers of Israeli air defense systems as well as American air defense systems. This would then put a large number of U.S. bases under risk. It would put other U.S. assets under risk. And of course, the Iranians have other types of missiles that could be targeted directly at the U.S. Navy in the Persian Gulf and in the Indian Ocean. The intent or the calculation is not that the Iranians could win a war per se. Obviously, they recognize how much they are outgunned. But the calculation is that if they can inflict significant damage on Trump, Trump will recognize that this is ultimately a losing proposition for him as well. He may win the war, but he will lose his presidency. Midterm elections are coming up. The last thing he wants is to be embroiled in a never-ending, forever war in the Middle East. And as a result, by being able to push back hard, the Iranians would manage to get Trump to dramatically change his calculations, including his maximalist demands. Again, whether that can work out the way they think is a completely different story. No one knows until until the war has started. But I think hopefully the regional efforts will make sure that this is never tested in the first place. Because I think still the de-escalatory path that is most effective is for the Iranians to simply pick up the phone and make a phone call.
All right. Trita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thanks so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Great to get your perspective.
Thank you.